Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Today we have a manga review of chapter 880, No Way Out. And let's be real, it's not the best chapter. This was going to be very predictable, but I blame a lot of that on the sheer quantity of pudding we got. Now in real life, a lot of pudding is very rarely a bad thing. In fact, it's a delicious thing. However, in the One Piece world, too much pudding just becomes stale and disappointing. And that's honestly how I spent the first half of this chapter. I looked at the title, which was quite ominous and cool, and then I spent 8 whole pages wondering when we'd get to something interesting. Look, it could have been a lot worse, but half the chapter was dedicated to the cake baking plot, and while it wasn't all that interesting, it was admittedly necessary. But it could have done without Pudding's character quirks. And actually, come to think of it, as much as I hate on her, most of her action in this chapter was quite solid. She was in charge, she put her plan into motion flawlessly, but after they'd gotten the chefs on their side, she became very irritating once more. But I did really like the way Pudding used her powers to turn the chefs to their side by making them enter the kitchen one by one and restructuring their memories. That was actually a pretty clever way to acquire an army of sous chefs, and I'm glad it happened because even though One Piece is set in a complete fantasy world, I still would have found it a bit unrealistic if Sanji, Pudding, and Chiffon had been able to make the cake all on their own. And speaking of the cake, we have just begun our official Whole Cake Island countdown. It will take 3 hours to bake and deliver the cake, and oh my god, does that seem like a disgusting amount of time, or what? Given that the last few chapters of the story have covered mere minutes of time, I'd say we're going to have one or several mini time skips to make this happen. But honestly, 3 hours is a disappointing number for me to hear. Actually, it's always painful when time gets brought up as a major factor in One Piece, because at that moment I can quite literally feel the pace slowing down. Like Luffy's 10-minute recovery in Dressrosa. As soon as he said 10 minutes, I was like, well, that's the next month and a half of chapters focusing on a countdown. And unless there's a major shift in events, I'm going to say that it's probably going to happen here again as well. I reckon we might have at least a month and a half of cake-baking Katakuri fighting Big Mom escaping chapters before this 3-hour countdown is complete. In defense of the 3 hours though, baking cakes is a horribly slow process, so if Sanji were able to pull something out of his ass to make it instant, once again it wouldn't feel realistic. So I think I was going to be disappointed either way. It's just the reality of adding another plot to an already in-motion escape sequence. Speaking of escaping, it's once again looking dire for the Straw Hat Pirates. Big Mom has essentially summoned a tsunami, which looks an awful lot like Zeus, to reach their ship and looks like she is about to come crashing down. The chapter even ends very unconventionally. The final panel is simply black with the Don sound effect. The last time I remember that happening was when Luffy whooped out Gear 4th. The last panel was pure black with a speech bubble containing the words, Gear 4th. Although the panel and the bubble were a lot bigger. It's a pretty dramatic choice by Oda to end the chapter this way, and probably a necessary escalation, because we've had a ton of chapters ending with the impending doom of the Straw Hats quite recently. With that said, this clearly isn't all that bad, because the only two people who we have reacting to the tsunami are Nami and Carrot. Brook, Chopper, and Jinbei are absent for this last page, and each of them are quite capable of forming some sort of escape plan. With Brook and Chopper, I'd think that they could probably load some of the people into the submarine, but let's be real, this is a problem for Jinbei to deal with. Anything to do with water is this guy's domain, and he hasn't had his moment of escape glory yet, so I think that's what this is setting up. Either he'll be a complete boss and somehow destroy the tsunami, or he could also do something like summon whales or some kind of other underwater creature to evacuate the Sunny with great haste. Actually, you know what? Upon second reading, I am absolutely convinced that he has this covered. 2 pages before the tsunami is revealed, Jinbei is shown reacting to something with an ellipsis. A dramatic ellipsis, I might say. And it's clearly not Luffy's discussion with Nami. Our boy Jinbei knows what's up, so it is for sure his time to shine next chapter. Now what is significantly less covered is Luffy dealing with Katakuri. He is getting absolutely wrecked. Katakuri looks almost entirely unharmed and even brags that he thought Luffy would put up more of a fight than this. I think that's what we all thought, actually. It's important to note that it doesn't look like Luffy's used Gear 4th yet. If so, then I'm not entirely sure what he's waiting for, unless he really has hit his limit for this arc. Remember, he got in one Gear 4th punch against Big Mom and then pretty much instantly had to revert to his base form. Maybe Gear 4th is just too unsustainable for Luffy right now, and he's trying to save it for a moment when he sees the chance to strike the finishing blow. But that's not looking very likely. I mean, Doflamingo outclassed Luffy when he wasn't using Gear 4th, so it's only logical to assume that Katakuri would barely break a sweat, I guess. With that in mind, I'm kind of out of ideas for how Luffy could win this one-on-one. There are other possibilities though, like maybe Capone and or the Vinsmokes coming to his rescue, but it seems very out of character for them, especially Capone. And with that said, I doubt Capone has actually left the island yet, or will leave the island without his darling Chiffon. He seems to genuinely care for his family, so I reckon the Fire Tank Pirates are going to show up to help out the cake baking team at some stage. Oh, and a bit of miscellaneous information, we were introduced to another two Charlotte siblings this chapter, Mascarpone and Joe Scarpone, who are the 34th son and 29th daughter respectively. I'll say that again, 29th daughter, and I draw special attention to that number because when we were introduced to Aladdin's wife, the mermaid Charlotte Praline, she was also revealed to be the 29th daughter of the Charlotte family. So unless this was a translation error, this may have just been a case of Oda picking arbitrary numbers and getting unlucky. As a result, I expect that Joe Scarpone's number will be changed in the volume release. Also, these two characters were very clearly fathered by a member of the Longneck tribe, and like every Charlotte family member, they are named after food, as mascarpone is a type of cream cheese, also known as the weakest of all cheeses. Seriously, I like my cheese solid and flavorful. Mascarpone gives me neither of those. In my opinion, it doesn't even deserve to be called a cheese. I tell you, if I was the Pirate King, the first thing I would do is boot it out of the cheese family. But that is a long way away, so let's move on. And finally, let's talk about the cover page. So I don't feel too bad for Uhalisha anymore, given that she already has a collection of 25 husbands in her husband club. It's quite a nice humorous twist that definitely makes Sai not seem like so much of a dick anymore, and Uhalisha actually reminds me a lot of Big Mom, except that she actually keeps her many husbands. And she really must be pretty powerful actually, not just in terms of strength, but wealth and influence. I'm starting to think that she may have been a princess or dignitary of some other country that Sai was trying to marry into in order to form an alliance or something. But that about does it for chapter 880. Not a bad read by any means, but definitely average, which for One Piece is still pretty damn good. It was definitely a setup and transition chapter, by which I mean nothing really happened. All we got was the stuff that we already knew was going to happen being set into motion. So now that this is all out of the way, I'm very much looking forward to next week, which will hopefully be featuring plenty of Jinbei action. If you enjoyed this video, then please feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe, and please do comment with your thoughts on the chapter. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.